Here we are again. Hello. Come on in. I'm so happy to have you here. As you're coming in to the call today, when you get a chance, would you put in the chat, I actually thought of the question in advance. Look at that. Would you put in the chat what you love to make other than with a sewing machine? I will start. I like to talk while I type, just so you know. Oh, Brooksand Camper. I can't even say that you copied me because, there you are. So as you're coming in, if you put in the chat, what is it that you love to make or work with other than with a sewing machine? Roxanne Camper says woodworking, which was very similar to my answer, which is also woodworking. I love to make little boxes like camping boxes and things that I find useful. I'm always loving making things that are useful, whatever that definition is. Amanda says she likes to make hippie dough or like a sensory Play-Doh. Very fun. Sarah, fiber in all forms. Yeah, I can relate to that too. Textiles are really my thing outside of wood. It's not really a textile, but yeah. Elizabeth says crocheting with yarn, cricket crafting, which is super fun. I've actually never really seen a cricket cutter. I think that's what they're called, right? I'm going to show my ignorance here. But that's super fun. Kelly likes to 3D print. That's cool. I've also never seen a 3D printer in action. Our local library has one, but I've never actually seen it going. What do you like to print, Kelly? And if you want, you can unmute yourself and just and answer that if you'd like to. Or you can put it in the chat. Oh, welcome, welcome, welcome. Amanda, would you make it possible for Kelly to unmute herself so she can answer that third 3D printing question? Elizabeth says baking cookies and bread. Very nice. And Kelly, householdy things, like sewing householdy things. Oh, 3D printing. Right. That's where the connection is.
Yeah, so I've actually been able to 3D print some things related to sewing, which is pretty cool. I enjoy that. Anytime I have something that I want to do like for storage or like you can just customize it to your exact sort of thing, which is kind of what I like about sewing and what I like about 3D printing. But what I really like, I mean, sort of the thing about 3D printing that I like is that it's a sort of a slow craft. Like it takes a while to do. It's not a fast thing. Like one thing will take hours. It's a slowish process. So
but it's not hands-on, correct? Like once you get it going, is
right,
it?
yeah. So that you can get it going and then walk away. Here, I got my
No, you really opened my mind up because like custom sized little storage thingies. Because like I just talked, I love to make like wooden boxes and things. I love little containers for things.
Yes.
Oh, that's really intriguing.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. Is that it's very customizable. So even like for kitchen drawer organizers, I mean, I can make things for specific utensils and then they all sort of, line up. And
My heart is pitter-pattering right now.
Another kind of cool thing related to sewing with it, I don't know if they're IKEA makes these boards that are sort of like a pegboard. They're called skeld something. But anyway, they're sort of like an IKEA version of a pegboard, and they come in I want to say like 24 or maybe 18-inch squares with all these pegs on them, but they make a ton of printable things that you can put on your IKEA pegboard related to sewing, so for like hanging specific things. So the pegboard is nice because you can do the location, but then you can
Right.
also make it unique to what you're hanging there. So yeah,
That is very fun. Thank you for sharing that.
thank you.
Yeah. Amanda says that she, unlike my laser printing, no walking away from wood cutting. Oh, right. When we said that you could walk away from 3D printing. Um, Kathy S, are we talking about 3D printers? We were. Do you have anything to add when it comes to 3D printers, Kathy? Not to put you on the spot, but
Well, no, I'm actually making lunch, which is why I'm off camera. But no, I was just like, what is this magical machine? And then toward the end, I realized it was 3D printers. But I guess, Kelly, a question for you is where do you find these like sewing related printables for 3D printers? I don't have access to a 3D printer anymore, but color me intrigued.
yeah.
Back over here. So there are a couple of sites online. The one is called Thingiverse, like thingiverse.com. Another good one that I like is just printables.com. And
Huh.
you can just go search, like I'll search for sewing. And then there'll be models that people have made. Lots of times somebody's already made it. Just especially simple things somebody's already made it, or even very specific things. I did something not too long ago and somebody had like a specific model of a little handheld vacuum cleaner that they made an adapter for. And I mean, so sometimes they're very specific, sometimes they're just like, if it's something simple, somebody's probably already modeled it. Then you download the models and then you just send them to your printer. And it'll tell you when you get them ready to send to the printer how long it'll take. So even if you have one at the library, if it's something that's just a couple hours, you could, start it if you're going to be at the library for a little while, start it, and then, it'll print by the time you're done. So, yeah, I encourage 3D printing.
This is very intriguing. Thank you again. I
You
appreciate
bet. Anytime.
it. All right. Let's get started in earnest here today. So this is a little different kind of an episode, just in that you're going to hear from me. And I have some things I wanted to share with you and talk with you, but I'm also encouraging you to talk with me. So feel free to pop into the chat or to raise your hand if you want to ask a question that has to do with what I'm talking about, or a statement, or like just whatever that might be, because I want it to be this little more interactive conversation between us. But I will open it up to questions, just like straight up questions at the end as well. And then tomorrow, many of you probably already know, but we are having several of the guest speakers from the last week and a half are going to come back, and we're going to have a group conversation. It's going to be talking about the things and ways that they elevate what they make, whether that's like taking the time to add I'm not going to tell you because I won't want to tell you my tip yet until tomorrow. So tips on elevating your project, and also and it's gonna be so much fun because we're gonna have this opportunity to have this conversation flowing back and forth and probably think of things that we as the speakers hadn't thought of before to share. And then we'll also do a bit of show and tell, which I know some of you have been asking for because it's so much fun to see what people are talking about as they're talking. And I'm going to ask you to bring your favorite tools and your show and tell, and we'll include that into just kind of this celebration to commence the end of the break, the Rules of Sewing show, which has been so much fun. And I know that I, at this point at least, plan to do it again next year. So put it in the calendar. It's probably earlier in the year, but it has been so much fun. And I'm so grateful you're here. So thank you for that. So today I wanted to start with sharing my journey. And if you've been listening to me for any bit of time, you know some of these stories already, but I've been a maker my whole life. I made all sorts of things. Anything that I could craft, anything I could make, I worked on. But I was not a garment sewist until I was in my late 20s. My grandmother was a seamstress, and she worked in a factory during the day, and she did wedding dresses and bridesmaids dresses and things like that on the weekends and at night. And then she made doll clothes for all of her grandkids. And she made all of my formal dresses when I was in high school. And I can remember distinctly pins all up in her mouth, like, sticking out, right? And I know that you know what that's like. And I want to tell you a story real quick. You're going to get a little side stories here because it's just me and I'm just talking to you. Um, But she used to put pins in her mouth and have them sticking out so she'd grab them and pin it the garment. And I still do that to this day, and it's a bad habit, and I know that, and I keep trying to break it, but I can't quite. Like, it's so ingrained in me to have this habit. But I had a student once, a couple of years ago, who was horrified to see this because she had a friend who was doing that and inhaled one of the pins and punctured her lung. And I'm like, that should be a strong enough story to stop me from doing this bad habit. But I wonder if any of you also put pins in your mouth while you're working on something. So put that in the chat if you do. I hope somebody puts it in the chat. I can't be the only person that does that. Okay, good. Excellent. Um, so I remember my grandmother distinctly, and I was 17 years old, and she would tell me, "You better pay attention because I'm not going to be around forever." But I didn't, and she wasn't. She got into a car accident my senior year of high school, and she passed on. And then, so I never learned to sew from her. I never learned any of those crafts, which so many of you have a similar kind of story. My mom wasn't a sewist, sort of skipped that generation. And then in my late 20s, I was looking for a dress and I couldn't find anything that fit my body because I had this weird body that was large breasted and relatively smaller waisted and larger and like all these things, right? All these terms, which mean nothing to me now, but they used to mean something to me then. And oh wait, I have to answer these pin questions. Give it one quick pause. So we have a medical professional here, and she says, never put pins in your mouth. Yeah, I know they're so dangerous. I appreciate that. And then somebody also asked me, do I have any of my grandmother's doll clothes? And I do not. Our house burnt down when I was in my early 20s when I still had all of my belongings at my parents' house, and her house burnt down. So I don't have any of that stuff, sadly. So, okay. So I'm in my 20s. I think I have this strange body. I can't find dresses that fit me. Nothing will fit my chest and also make me not feel like I'm wearing a sack of potatoes. And this is like, the early 2000s. I want a cute summer dress. I can't find one. And so I happen to be in a thrift store and I find this like polyester knit house dress that is handmade. And I try it on because it looks kind of like it might fit me. And it does, it fits me perfectly, and I love this for so many reasons. One is that I try to really be thrifty and mindful of my impact in the world, so, like, thrifting it was perfect, and I also, I I never had a dress that just fit me so well. I thought that I couldn't wear dresses, which is ironic now that I only wear dresses, but at the time, I thought that I couldn't, and so I tried this on, and I loved the other magic that I loved of it is that just the thought that somebody else had made this with their own 2 hands, and that at some point in time, this was like a 1950s polyester, so I don't know when they existed in my community, but at some point in time, they walked around with my body or something very similar to it, and I just thought that was kind of magical, and I love it, I believe probably like a lot of you do, that the things that we make by hand, like, carry a bit of our love or our soul in some kind of magical way with them, right? Like there's a little bit of us, of the maker, or as Brooksand Camper mentioned, the mark of the maker, like not even just like the actual visual mark of the maker, but like there's something intangible about things that are handmade as well. So I loved it for all these reasons. I hated it for how stinky it was. So it was like a 50s polyester. It was like this really dull mint green. So it did nothing for my complexion and I smelled horrible when I wore it. And so I decided I wanted to make another dress just like this. So I thought if this dress exists, I can make another one. And so yes, and the polyester funk for sure. And so I have always been very industrious. I've always been very just jump off the cliff kind of a human. So I got out some newspaper. I took this dress, I laid it on the newspaper, I traced around it with a Sharpie because it was very simple. It was just a bodice and an A-line skirt with a waist seam. And I had sewn a few things over the time in my 20s. I made a quilt once. I recovered a couch another time, like, just simple things like that. And so I traced it out on this beautiful quilting cotton that I found. And I just inspected the garment that I was looking at to kind of like figure out how to put it together. and I made this dress. And so the original dress did not have any fasteners. So my new dress also did not have any fasteners. But what I didn't understand was that I was working with a stretchy polyester knit and a non-stretchy quilting cotton. And so while the dress still fit over my head and I could kind of squeeze my body parts through the waist seam and fit it onto my body, I couldn't do a lot of breathing or walking or running around. But I wore that dress for a long time and with so much pride. And it was the gateway dress to 16 years later, sewing almost in my entire wardrobe by hand. Um, it began as a project to get clothes that fit me and also to kind of prove that I was capable, that I could do this, that I had this skill, this like, I don't have to be part of the system, whatever the system is, right? Like I get to live my life how I want to. I don't have to just take whatever styles might be in the store. I could express myself how I wanted to. I also loved it for the sustainability aspect of it. I could determine where my garments were made in my own house, but I could also determine what kind of fabric I was using. I could have some control over mm, the process of clothing myself. Like I definitely had dove deep into slow fashion at that point and looking at I was also gardening and canning, like so it was all this natural progression for me to hang on to it. Now I am to a point though where definitely all of that is important, but it's been there for so long that it just is part of my process. But I have no tolerance whatsoever anymore for anything store bought that doesn't fit me really well. Occasionally I'll find something that fits me well, but even when I do, I often want to tweak something on it. I want to shift this, I want to shift that because once you have something that fits you well, and that can be a process, that can take some time. Um, it's really hard to go back to things that are fiddly. Like I hate fiddly things, right? This is why I love to wear dresses. They're just simple. I get to have a lot of style, a lot of pizzazz as far as I'm concerned, but I don't have to fiddle with like there's never any muffin top. There's never anything like that going on for me. So for me, that's a great look and a great feeling. And I love anything that I can embrace as something that we do to take control of our own lives. So if you've been listening to the podcast that I have, you know that I really focus on that we get to control our experience in life. We can't control what's happening to us, but we get to have some control over our experience of it. We get to determine how much joy we have in our life. We get to determine what kind of clothes we want to wear and how we want to show up in the world, lit up and on fire. And so that's kind of my journey as a garment sewist. Um, And then about a decade ago, I started to teach as well because I love teaching. It lights me up in the same kind of way that making my own clothes lights me up. I love empowering other people to do the things that they want to do, wear what they want to wear, embrace the body that they have, and just find joy in their life. And I think that sewing has a way of doing that. And so I think that we have heard from so many people in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, that do things all a little differently and embrace it differently. And I am so inspired by that, and I know that you are as well because 'cause I've heard from so many of you via email. Um, it's so much fun to have this artistry and this way of creating and this way of using our 2 hands to make something and have it be uniquely what we want it to be, and also get to do the process how we want it to be. So, that's my story. So, about 5 or 6 years ago, I started doing sewing retreats. And part of wanting to do the retreats was that I was craving community. I was craving community of other makers in particular. Like I wanted people that were like-minded that I could talk sewing with, that I could go deep into other topics with. And I wanted to come together in that sort of quilting bee sort of feeling. And so I started doing retreats 6 years ago. Cal Patch was with me on my first retreat on Mackinac Island, which is super fun. She was a teacher and I was the host for that retreat. And then now I do retreats on Mackinac Island twice a year. Just to do a little plug, if you have any interest, we have a few spaces left in the fall. It's in October on Mackinac Island in Michigan, and we are going to go into drafting a knit t-shirt, and then it's going to be really going deep into the artistry. So we're going to draft it. We're going to really perfect the fit of it. And then we're going to spend a great deal of time making little samples and working through pattern manipulation, because that's one of my favorite things. And if I were to say how I break the rules of sewing, it's my favorite way to go about this. And my favorite thing to show or teach other people is to have some patterns, and whether you draft them yourself or you have some core patterns that fit your body really well, that you've worked on fitting. And so you've got some things that are tried and true. You love how they fit, you love how they look, and maybe they've got some basic lines to them. I love showing people how to take those patterns, again, whether that's a block or a core pattern, and manipulating that pattern into all different kinds of styles, anything you can even imagine, right? I think that is so empowering. And not only does that show you that like you can create anything you want to create, obviously you can still buy somebody else's independent commercial pattern, and I do from time to time as well. And then work through the fit process, because like you kind of have to start with one or the other, right? You either have something that fits you really well because you drafted it, or you have worked through the fit problems, issues, whatever you want to call them, until you get to something that fits you really well, or you have to choose. Oh, wait, so let me finish that. And then you can take that and you can change the style. You can do all different kinds of styles you want to do. Or you take a commercial pattern and somebody's already worked out a style for you. It's already been developed, but now you have to fine tune the fit. So like it's sort of this pick or choose, you get to do one or the other. Generally, you could shift them. There's ways to shift that. You could just drape right onto your dress form, or you could clone something that you already have that has stylings that you want. But there's always a place where you as a sewist get to practice your skill. So I love showing people how to take a core pattern or a pattern that fits them really well and manipulating it into all different things. And so we're going to work on that at the retreat. If you're interested, you can go to kinshiphandwork.com, and in the retreats page, you can see for the fall retreat, it's 6 days because I want us to go deep. And we also do things like morning circles, and we do Koya, which is a dance meditation thing in the afternoon. Don't let that scare you. It's so much fun. So nice. Elizabeth asked, where do we get the info for the class? So that was the information there. And Carol says, I've used the Kinship pants pattern and I made all kinds of pants, from PJ pants, crop pants, and recently a few pair of denim jeans. Very cool. So I've also done, during 2020 and 2023, I had 2 different courses that went out. One was called So Clothes You Love, where I really focused on, thank you, Kathy. She put the link to the retreat center, where I really focused on determining what it is that you love to wear. And we spent like the 3/4 of that course just talking about like, what is it you love to wear? Because I feel like this is one of my breakthroughs as well, is that if you don't really know what it is that you want to wear, then it's going to be really hard to create something and spend the time and energy at it that you love to wear. And that doesn't mean that there isn't value sometimes in just experimenting, learning a skill, and maybe you end up with something that isn't your favorite and you pass it on, but you gained a ton in that process. Um, I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, so it doesn't mean that there's not value in making something that isn't something that you necessarily love, but you want to learn new techniques, you want to elevate what you're doing, you want to shift what you're doing. But I think that one of the things I hear so much from students is that they've made something and they don't love how it looks in the end. They chose the wrong fabric, whatever that means. The fit isn't good. Why on earth did they choose a large flower pattern when they hate large flower patterns? Like all of these things, right? And so I think my course, So Clothes You Love, is all about, it still exists, determining what it is you really love to wear, what's going to light you up so that you walk through the world feeling empowered and strong and beautiful, just like you are. And because that's why I sew. That's why I sew, and that's why I teach sewing, because it makes me feel really good. It hits all my boxes. It makes me feel really good in my body. It makes me feel really good with my skills. It makes me feel proud of what I can do. It makes me feel like I get to choose my life. Like there are so many ways in which sewing clothing just checks all the boxes. And so I want to share that with people. So Clothes You Love was really focusing on style and choosing what you want. And that doesn't mean like style, like what you should wear. That means like what makes you feel like, "Wow, look at me, I am powerful." Like some people find that a challenging statement, but you know what I mean. And then in the end, I take you through how to use a commercial pattern and make some changes and some adjustments to it, choosing your size wisely so that you have an easier time creating a garment that fits you pretty well. That doesn't mean you're not going to have to do some fine-tune fitting, because as we know, we all have these unique 3D bodies that have different little valleys and mountains. And even if our measurements are the same, we still carry weight differently generally. And so there's still going to be some fine tuning, but I have some tricks that I show that you can get from where you are starting closer to where you want to be. And then you just have a few changes to do later. So that was So Clothes You Love, which is still available on the website. And I'll probably run it live sometime later on this year. And then I also did the Make It Your Own Society. And that went for 18 months from 2020 to 2021. And we took those core patterns. I developed 7 core patterns, like Carol mentioned. The pants was one of them. And we took them, we got them fitted really well so that we had these base tried and true patterns that we could then do all different kinds of designs with, which is what really gets me excited. And what so many of our speakers talked about is this idea of making it your own, right? Like taking your pattern, and again, whether you start with drafting from the very scratch of your body, but taking that and manipulating the pattern to create anything you can dream of, any design that you can think of. And I think that is the beauty of sewing. I want to know, if you will, it's so interesting to be talking with so many little like pictures. They're looking at me. So in the chat, will you put whether you have ever drafted a pattern or manipulated a pattern? And that could just be as simple as like you wanted a different neckline, or you changed the finish on the hem, whatever that might be. Will you put a comment in the chat if you've done that? And as your fingers are typing there, I am going to say that like one of the other tips that I have um, is that, and somebody else, this has actually been mentioned several times in the last week and a half, is like the more you understand fabric and the more that you know what your fabric, how it's going to behave, the better chance you're going to have of creating something that you really love. And something that inspired me in the last week and a half that I've never really done, like generally, if I'm going to make something for myself, I'm going to have sort of the finished product, if you will, in mind. So often, like I've seen a dress like it, or I know I want something that's going to make me feel a certain way, or I need for a hole in my, like I need a layering piece, but I know that I want it to feel cozy and comfy, or I want it to feel a little sexy, or whatever that might be, right? That's generally how I start out with a project, is I know how I want to feel about it, how I want to feel in it. And so I sort of have this formulated idea already designed in my head. And then I'm getting distracted by the chat, even though I just asked you to chat there. And then I take it and I'll start to look for fabrics that will work well with the project I'm looking for. That, like, if I want something really drapey, I'm probably going to look in the rayon kind of world. I do always love modal. If I want something with a little more body, I'll probably look for something that has like a hemp cotton blend to it. And I do want to say again, I sew probably 99% in knits because I love to wear knits. And I sometimes will make something out of a woven and it's beautiful and I love it. But like, I don't love wearing wovens all that often. I like total freedom of movement and I like fitted. So like the two of those go hand in hand really well with knits. And I love feeling like I could do any kung fu at any moment that I wanted to. And this give me that ability. So I typically will teach knits as well. Not that I can't teach other things, because I've sewn lots of other things as well. But it's what my passion is, and it's what I love to share, because a lot of people think that knits are really scary, right? And there's some scary aspects, if you will. because I think more so than with wovens even, knits have more variables that can happen. So like you can have a different stretch percentage, and you can have so something even something that's got, let's say you've got an organic cotton or just a cotton, and you've got a cotton with a little bit of elastane in it, and their stretch is going to be very different, which means that's going to fit your body very differently. And if you are really picky, like I am, about how things fit, it's going to really matter to you that this garment that is made out of something with some elastane in it is going to be much looser on you, and much is kind of relative here, but looser on you than something that doesn't have any elastane at all. And it may also have better recovery. So like, I'm totally sidetracking here, but you know how when you wear a shirt or a t-shirt that you buy, and over the course of the day it starts to like kind of stretch out or it loses its shape. Jeans will often do this too. So that's the recovery of it. If it doesn't recover well, then you'll get that bagging. But if it does recover well, and often with knits, that means it's got a little elastane in it. And even though I have a really strong value around, um, I have a really strong value around my types of fabrics that I use, I also want something that's going to make my heart better, right? I want something I'm going to end up wearing. And so I make that compromise personally between a little elastane and a natural garment, a natural fiber, because I want it to have the performance I want it to have and still be the kind of materials I want. So it's kind of this compromise. Anyway, so I think it's really important that you know your fabrics, because knits can be so different in so many ways, as can wovens, truly. So then I will go from when I'm doing my project, I will then sort of bring all my pieces together. And then once I have it together, then I'll start to sketch out what it is that I want to create. And it's usually in the sketching phase, something like this, that I might do, that I'll sort of shift my design ideas. And then I'll start to draft it, or I'll start to manipulate a pattern. Generally, I will be using a pattern I already have, and I'll start to manipulate that pattern to create what I want. And then I'll make it. And generally I'll make it in something that is what I would consider a wearable muslin. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, then I often have something that I still wear because it's pretty close, but it's not quite. And if I really love the design, then I'll go in and then I'll make a second iteration. I'll make the changes that I think it needs. And then I'll end up with something that I love. That's typically my process. The ways in which I want to elevate that and shift it, and that I have been learning from all of you and from everybody who's been speaking, is that I want to take more time, because I can kind of be like, I have this idea that time is scarce. And so I don't have much time to sew the things I want to sew. So rather than take the time sometimes to create something different, I'll just make what I've made before, because I need a new dress, and that's still exciting. I still get that hit of, yay, I made a new dress, or made a new layering piece, or made new leggings or whatever. But I don't always take the time to slow it down and try out different design ideas, or even do different things that I've done before, but that are going to take a little bit more time. So like, my goal for this year, and it'd be interesting to see what your goals are for this year. My goal for this year is to take more time, add in some different pieces and some different design elements that are going to take my garment to a different level and give me more of that sense of like, I'm here embracing my artistry. I'm experimenting. I want to try doing more samples than I have in the past. Like, this is where my personal practice, or I'd like to bring in. So I wonder, I'm going to look back and see what your comments were that I did not look at yet. I wonder if you put in the comment section, the chat section, what it is that you would like to focus on as far as skill building or practice building this year. So I asked if anybody had done any pattern drafting and cloning. A lot of you said, yes, I did. Elizabeth says I did it last year at the fall retreat. Kathy says she's cloned basic patterns, just drafted my first skirt from scratch in Brooke Sand's class. Amy says, absolutely. I wanted a crop t-shirt instead of a tunic. So I'm guessing she just did that, made that happen. Donna has not yet. It's super fun, Donna. And Carol says she took a class with Cal and Tina for a drafted tunic pattern. I also have modified the Kinship pants pattern to accommodate various iterations. Kathy says, me too, but knits are tough to work with. Working on that now. I would love to dispel that for you, that knits are tough to work with. They have their own learning curve for sure. They have their own aspects. Like I said, knits have the variable of that they can stretch more or less, and that can really shift what your fit is going to look like. But they have the same kind of ideas as far as like certain fabrics that the fiber content is going to create something that's more drapey. There's certain fiber contents that could create something that has more body. So there are lots of different things. There are lots of different things that can come within it. The beautiful thing is that it can make fitting simpler. And I say can because sometimes then people get sort of hyper focused on different kind of stretch lines because now you've got a little bit of negative ease and your garment is stretching over your body in a way. And so now you've got different lines that you want to work on to perfect the fit or learn to love, because we still have to move in our clothes. So there still has to be a little bit of, there has to be some lines on your clothing. It can't be completely flat all the time, completely smooth, because then you're standing there like unable to move and do all the things you want to do. So Anne says that she's excited to learn more about stretch percentage, and I have to tell you, stretch percentage is one of the things that's really important to me, and it's important to me when I teach, because I think that it's what's going to give you success when you are looking for something that fits you in a particular way, because the same yardage from a rayon and a cotton jersey is going to give you a very different fit. I have a pair of leggings that I made out of rayons that I call the octopus leggings, because like I made those years ago and they lasted forever. But they would stretch so much on my leg, but they had such recovery, they would come back to my leg. But like when my little boy was tiny, he would like tug on my leggings, as they do. And it like he could go into the next room. I think they had so much stretch to them. And so it's important to know that for success, if it matters to you. And if it doesn't matter to you, if you're like, I'm good with it just being a little bit looser, or I want it to be, you have a lot of tolerance for things that don't fit more fitted, like then the stretch percentage becomes not as important, although it is always important when you're doing something like leggings. I would even say panties, but anything that's going to come both around your body and up and over your body. So I'll talk at the end of our session today. I'll show you how to calculate the stretch percentage in units. Anne says she feels the same way about elasting. And Elizabeth says this year she'd like to sew for herself more than for others. That's a good goal. Martha says, as mentioned a few days ago, how I pick source knits for muslin for the more expensive fabric you want to use. So that's the question that she's got there. It can be challenging. So like typically when you're working with a woven and you choose just a cotton muslin, like a muslin fabric that you purchase, its characteristics are generally fairly universal. Not completely, right? Like that isn't a complete answer, but often you can use that muslin material and get a pretty good idea for how a woven garment is going to fit you. Yes, you can find a woven that has more drape or less drape, and that will shift. But knits can be so variable that I often don't have specific, this is the truth. This is my breaking the rules, I guess. I often don't have specific muslin fabric for my knit garments. I just buy extra of what I like, because, and I know that there's that cost factor in there, right? But this is a hobby, and this is something that you love doing and that you are gaining skill at. So anytime you create something, one is it's very likely that you can make it into a wearable muslin. Like we talked last week, at some point about how if I have a neckband that didn't fit me well, it didn't work out, it's standing up, it didn't get my stretch quite right when I put it on, I'll just adjust it. I'll either cut it off and start again, and I have a little bit lower shirt top than I did, or I'll fold it to the inside and sew it down and make it into a facing. Like, there are ways in which you can take a muslin and didn't work out quite how you were thinking it would, and still make it very wearable, and then make the changes for the next iteration, the one that's in your mind. So I typically will have fabrics like that, where I just have extra of the fabric, the expensive fabric, if you will, and then I'll work with it. And if it isn't working quite right, then I'll see what I can adjust from it or see what else I can do with that fabric or that garment. And then I'll make my finished object after that. Otherwise, what you could do is you could purchase cheaper knit fabrics that maybe aren't the right kind of fibers that you want to wear and really delegate them into the muslin category that you're using them for a toile or a mock-up only. But it comes down to it has to have the same stretch percentage as your project or very similar. And it has to have the same kind of drape and the same kind of body so that you can really get an idea of what it's going to look like. I hope they answered that question. Probably not how you wanted to hear it though. Barbara wants to experiment with necklines, collars, and sleeve embellishments. Absolutely. I do too. More of that. And Brookside Camper says her goal is like to make herself some clothes. She spends all of her time making lessons for others. The series has inspired me to start new personal projects already. Yay. Janice says, I want to work on forming my style look with minimal pieces. It doesn't seem to be what the current style is. You know what? I love that. I love that you are going to focus on what you want to wear because, like, ultimately, who cares what the current style is? And it has no bearing on what is going to make you feel good. And that's what I'm here to preach about for sure, is that make things that make you feel lit up and good and forget the rest. Elizabeth says, I want to transition to a projector sewing and increase my time in my craft room. Nice. I've not used a projector. Has anyone used a projector? Janice says, I have a bony long torso that shows up in knits. I would love to learn to work with knits that, oh, she keeps getting cut off there. Janice, when you have a minute coming up, I would love to talk more about that question here as we get going. Amy says, my goal to master is the hidden stitch when hemming tailored pants. Very nice. And I think Brookside Camper talked about that too, right? The idea that when you're hand sewing, you have the ability. I actually loved this statement that she made, and I hadn't thought of it in this way before. But when you have a sewing machine, typically your needles are going all the way through your project. So you're going to have stitch lines on either side. Yes, you can do a blind hem stitch on your sewing machine. That is possible. But when you hand sew, you have the ability to determine how many layers of fabric you're going to pick up when you're hand stitching. And so I should ask you, are you planning to do that with a hand stitch? Or are you thinking about learning a hidden stitch, if that's what you mean, on your sewing machine? Amy, will you let me know that? You can hop on and answer if you want to. Martha says she popped the turtleneck on her Nico top yesterday, even though it has 100% stretch. I just used a narrow zigzag, though, like the pattern said, and I have a new serger. But sewing knits is new to me, and the serger is totally new. When you say you popped the turtleneck, do you mean that the stitches broke when you put it over your head? I'm guessing that's what you mean. Okay. Well, my suggestion for that is if you're going to use your sewing machine, my suggestion is take your fabric, try take a little swatch of it and double it up kind of in the same, you probably have 3 layers of fabric, I would guess, for your turtleneck when that seam comes around. Put those all through your sewing machine and adjust the width and the length of your zigzag. And do a really narrow, short one, do a medium, do one that's wider but shorter, like try a few different ones and then stretch on them to see. You don't have to be like Hercules. You don't have to be like, I'm gonna break this thread. I just want you to be like, imagine normal wear and tear on it. When you stretch it, does it have enough stretch in what you would imagine is a normal way to work for your turtleneck? And if not, try out more of them until you get to the point where it might work. That being said, one of the reasons I love using my serger when I sew with knits is that the stitch line of a serger is incredibly stretchy. And so it gives you a lot of ability to stretch and not break anything as you are using it. But I used a sewing machine for probably 12 years or 13 years before I bought a serger. So you certainly can do that. Just practice and try out different zigzags and different widths and different lengths until you get one that doesn't pop when you pull it. On the fabric you're going to use. Jana says, how do I use knits that glide over my body like a woven? So I'm guessing what you're saying here is you don't want like a jersey that can be kind of thin and sort of like fall into the nooks and crannies of your body. Is that what you mean? If that's what you mean, then my suggestion is to get something more like a ponte or a double knit, something that has a little more body to it. Sometimes they can still have a great amount of stretch, but they have a little more body. They're not quite as drapey and they're a little thicker. And I think that that's really what you want to keep it from following every contour of your body. Elizabeth says most machines have a stretch stitch to use in place of the zigzag. They they do. I only have these like old lady machines because I love the old. This is actually fairly new for me, this one over here, but often I just use an old metal machine that has sort of limited stitches. But a triple zigzag often will work too and be a little more stretchy and just kind of has more strength to it. Oh, and Amy says the blind stitch on her machine. Yeah. My best tip for that, and somebody else might have another suggestion on that, is to, well, obviously you probably know this, but just to practice it and to get your manual out because each machine is a little differently, works a little differently, and it has a different setting for like the perfect blind stitch. But once you get it going, excuse me, the blind stitch on your machine is really simple. You just have to get your position correct so that when it comes over and it grabs the garment that's folded there, it's just grabbing it a little bit. You're not accidentally sewing over it. And Tilly says, where's your favorite place to purchase knit fabric online? It seems to me that there's less good knit options out there than woven. For sure. I think that's absolutely true. My favorite places are, I love Nature's Fabric. They have a variety of different fabrics that fit into my value system. And I also love, I just found them. Darn it, it's evading me. I will put it in the email that I send out after this if I can't recall it before we end. But I also am in love with merino wool jersey, which is not inexpensive. And I get that from a company in New Zealand called the Fabric Store Online, I think is what it's called. And they have just a beautiful range of colors. They're a B corporation, if that matters to you. And they have like merino wool jersey is just, it has that depth of color that you get with a wool or a silk, right? Any kind of a protein fiber gives you like deep, deep color. And I love jewel tones. So it has like this beautiful range of color. It's wool, so it's quite thin actually. So for summer wear, it's great because wool has a beautiful property of being like wicking as well as like insulatory. Like it's sort of magic. Wool is a magical material. Anyway, I love their wool jersey. I know that a lot of my folks that come into my classes also love Girl Charlie with two E's at the end. I think is how you spell Girl Charlie. Oh, Million Dot is who I just found. And the Million Dot, they have their own colorways that they have printed, I believe. And so that's been really fun to see. They have waffle knits and rib knits and terries and jerseys that are all in the same colorway, which is kind of fun. So if you're going to make a sweatshirt or something, you could get a terry. They'll have a rib knit that matches exactly, and so that's kind of fun to do. Yeah, Anne says that she loves wool. Wool underwear is great too if you haven't tried it. I actually have not tried it yet, but I have a student who is like my star student who has made lots of underwear out of merino wool and absolutely adores them. That's fun. Any other questions coming up? I know I kind of like was all over the place here. This is what happens when you're just rambling on by yourself. As you think of some more questions, I wanted to share the tips that everybody gave us this last week and a half, and also include my own. So at the end of every session, I asked all of the speakers to share one tip for elevating your sewing practice. And so this morning, before we got on today, I went through all the videos, old, they're like a week old. I went through all the videos and wrote down what folks had said. And it's interesting because I actually sometimes I had a different idea in my mind of what they said than what they actually did. I'm like, well, that's intriguing. But I think I was like morphing all what they had said into something more concise that way. So last Monday we talked to Cal, and her tip was to go a little beyond just making the garment. So don't just make the garment, which kind of fits into my goal for this year, right? To be better, if you will, and we all get to be wherever we are, to be better at adding in more of the details that are going to take me a little more time. That's really my hang up on it. But maybe for you, it might be the hang up might be on the skill of adding it in or not sure how to do it. Like, but take the time to elevate it just a little bit by adding a little bit more than just making the garment. So that might be an embroidered poem in the collar. That might be a little tag at the back. That might be some pin tucks. Could be any number of things, right? But just like notching it up. Nan said to go to stores that you like maybe high-end stores, different places, and actually touch things and look at the details and maybe take a little sneaky picture and use that for inspiration and for understanding more the fabrics that you're feeling and what you like. Sarah Laws from last Wednesday said to go to a sewing class and just be accepting of where you are and what your pace is as far as a sewist. Like not worrying that you should know more than you do or that you don't know enough, but just taking it one step at a time. Jenny Hazard says to find the one thing that vexes you most and learn how to fix it. And then find the next thing that vexes you most and learn how to fix that. And I thought, again, that just sort of blows my mind as a simple, doable tip. Roxanne Camper said to explore your options. There are so many ways to do things. Do you hate, I think her example was, do you hate cutting things out? Maybe there's a different way to do it that you'll really love. Like explore different ways that you can do something so that you can go from hating it to loving it or even just enjoying it more. Mary Grabenstatter, her tip was to be unafraid to fail. Like, just go for it. Like, use the expensive fabric and try it out. Like, there's nothing really that's going to behave exactly like your fabric, like the fabric that you have that you want to use. And even, even if you took that fabric and you did little samples on the side of like the little scraps and like testing out what you're going to do in that way, then that becomes sort of its own muslin in a way, not for fit, but for style. Taylor McVeigh suggests striving for more precision in your sewing. Like that's one of the best ways to elevate what you're doing is to take the time to get more precise in any given way. And Tilly says to use all 10 fingers. Get your hands on it, work it through the machine, and use all 10 fingers. And I think of it, this is my paraphrase, like be one with the fabric a little bit more so, be one with the project. My tip to add to that amazing list, a lot of those are things that I would love to add as well, but is to get to know what you truly like and then experiment. So I really believe that in this life, the more we understand what suits us and what we like, and that doesn't mean like get stuck in a rut. So I don't want that for you either. Like, but once you understand that you love certain things and you just embrace the fact that you love them, then you have a better chance of creating something that you're really going to adore wearing because it fits your style, it fits your body, it fits your color palette, like it just fits. And then sometimes you'll do something completely off the wall and you'll either love it or you won't. But like as a whole, and it kind of fits into what a lot of the teachers talked about too. Like once you get to know more about sewing, about fabric, then you can make more educated decisions to like shift or to change or to do it differently. And so I think once we get to know ourselves really, really well, then you won't be maybe swayed by this pattern that looks amazing on so many people, but like it's not something you would ever buy in the store. So then you don't buy the pattern, get the fabric, make it, and then think, the hell did I get this for? I'm never going to wear this, right? Like I don't want that for you. I want you to have clothes that you adore and that you wear and that you feel great in. So those are my tips. Now, one of them was my tips. The rest were the rest of the speakers. Amy asked, who does sew along group sessions online? There's not a sewing center in my area. Do you mean, Amy, do you want to come on and talk to me? I would love to talk to somebody. Do you like how I'm putting you on the spot? All right, I'll answer the question then. No worries. I'm guessing you mean, oh, she's trying to unmute. Amanda, can you help Amy unmute, please? I don't seem to.
I'm trying to find you in the list, Amy. I clicked the ask to unmute. So you're going to have to just, hopefully you see a pop-up or something. Everybody does have the ability to unmute themselves. And I'm sure Tina would love it if we all came off video and gave her a little wave, because doing a solo show, that's tricky, good work there, Tina.
I could talk forever. So Amy, hopefully.
Yeah. You're stuck, Amy. You're really stuck. Okay.
Oh.
That's all I can do.
No worries. No worries. Amy, I'm wondering if you mean sew-alongs like for a specific garment, or do you mean like a group of people that are getting together and sewing things together and talking about the sewing process? Like what do you mean exactly by that question? Well, pop that in there when you get a chance. Anyone else have any questions or would like to come on and chat about anything? Maybe some sewing with knits questions. Maybe you want to share what beautiful thing you're wearing.
I have a question. This is Janice.
Yeah.
So with all the sewists online and viewing you, because you're the person we get to view, do most people sew solids for their wardrobe? And are prints something that limits your wardrobe and you're best to sticking to solids? How do people feel about that?
Let's do this. I'm going to put it on gallery. I don't know if anyone, oh, most people are not there.
I can comment about solids and prints. And I do have, can you hear me?
Yeah, and I'm like this because I'm looking at this flower that you're wearing and this.
So this is my new shirt I just made. And it's all scrap t-shirts that I pieced together.
Oh,
anyway, I do think that prints have an added challenge to work with. And I've been struggling with like matching up print, like if you don't match it up right, it can draw your eye in a bad way. So solids, I feel like are so much easier, but doing something like this, you're making something creative with solids and you're controlling it. I tried to make it intentionally wonky, but it does make my boobs look a little crooked. So, we learn.
That is adorable. I love it. Yeah, I can hear that. Like, I'm actually not drawn to patterns very often, or prints very often myself at all. I have like a little tiny dot on my shirt today, if you can see it, but um, that's about all I ever really go into. I really love solids. Uh, I can see a print on somebody else and think that looks amazing, but for some reason I don't love it on myself. Once I get it onto myself, it's kind of like Joe or Jenny Hassler last week mentioned, like, she loves rainbow prints, but she gets them on her body and she's like, I never like these on me. So I think that's part of it, but also, and it makes a great point, is that they're more challenging to match up and to make sure you don't have like a flower right where you don't want it or crooked boobs, whatever it might be. So Amy's asking about a live teaching session where we sew the same thing. I know I do virtual workshops where we sew the same thing. But as far as particular patterns, I think that a lot of independent pattern companies do sew alongs for whatever their pattern might be, or often they do. I find. Does anyone want to comment on that?
I'm recording a sew along tomorrow for my new shirt, but I've never thought about doing a live sew along. So I'm definitely interested to hear if that's something that interests people, to do something like more like this where you can talk in real time. I have
Yeah,
no idea.
right, right. Any thoughts on that? I could share my thoughts on it as a teacher who has sewn and taught with a lot of recorded material. Um, I have found that there's a different energy that comes when you do something live, like when I do a virtual retreat or virtual workshop that's live. There's a different energy to it, and people have more of an urgency, if you will, to do it and to be part of it. Whereas when it's something that's pre-recorded, I think that the beauty of it is that somebody can just kind of go at their own pace and flow through it. But for some people, the energy of doing it live and having that urgency, I guess, if you will, is something that they look for. Like, they want it gets them going through their project. So I think that there are different advantages to both. Anyone have a preference on whether you see something recorded that you watch on your own pace, or you show up to something live and work through? Well, all right. I think I'm gonna assume that we're split. That's why there's no answer there.
I'll jump in. I'll just say that there's definitely something about the community aspect of doing it live that I appreciate.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, there is the advantage of being able to like if you're doing it, from a recording, there are lots of advantages to that as well. But lots of times I miss the community part.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that.
I would agree. I have such a limited schedule that I appreciate being able to get to the recording and do it in the middle of the night if that's all when I can do it. But I also really like it when, you're doing it with friends and you feel like you're not just alone in your craft room doing it.
Yeah.
So
It sounds like there's like room to explore, maybe a mix of both, or, just like any other artistic career, you can kind of find a way to make it your own.
Yeah.
yeah, maybe something that had like the bulk of the actual like sewing along part is recorded, but then maybe like every night at 7 you get together as a group for half an hour or so and like talk about what you did that day, or once a week, or whatever, however the sew along is structured.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yep. When I did my Make It Your Own Society, for 18 months, we did that as a membership. And I, at the time, which was insane, and I didn't know it was insane, but I had determined that I would do a drawing at the end of the month. And for everyone who completed the project, they got like certain numbers of drawings, right? But if they were active in the community, they got entries, like all these entries, and I would make somebody something every month and send that to them. And that was the only crazy part is I was like, oh my gosh, I have to make another thing. But people in that membership loved that the excitement of maybe winning the homemade thing and like having that as like a deadline sort of to get it done. Yeah. Let's see. So a lot of people are saying live is great with the option of referring back to a recording, and definitely hearing what both Kelly and Elizabeth came in and mentioned is that they like to have the recordings. They can do that at their own pace, but to have that community part of it as well. And then
We just want it all. That's all.
yeah, we do. We do. And Amy says, I always need help because I'm not always great with reading directions. Understandable. And Brooks Ann says, my classes always have an open online group with just your classmates, but it's not live with talking heads. And I want to say, as somebody who's taken Brooks Ann Camper's class, which I think maybe everyone here has, I'm not really sure, but that's a really beautiful way as well. Like she's got a really engaged community that is they're putting pictures or making comments. Like it isn't quite the same as talking in real time, but it had that community feel to it. So that was a great way to have created that part of it for folks that wanted it. So, well, I've gone over it because, I'm cool that way. I am so grateful to have you all here today. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being here all this time. Tomorrow's going to be so much fun. Bring the cake, bring the champagne, and, your favorite tools. Maybe something you want to share and show and tell. And we're going to have folks coming back in to talk about ways that they elevate their makes, and also a little show and tell from them as well. So we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.